A girl mysteriously disappeared on her way to school. The police investigated for decades, but never found any clues. However, more than 40 years later, a book about the case suddenly emerged. Even more unexpectedly, with the release of this book, the case finally saw a breakthrough. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shinma Investigation Bureau. I am Chinma. Gretchen Harrington was born on the 13th of June, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest child in the family, with two older sisters above her. Shortly after she was born, the whole family moved to a small town called Boomer. Gretchen's father was a pastor, and he found a job at the local church. Boomer was a beautiful town, where residents lived harmoniously, and the religious atmosphere was especially strong. Since moving there, Gretchen's family settled in and lived comfortably. Every weekend, Gretchen attended Sunday school, a religious education program specifically for children, mainly focusing on religious lessons, usually taught personally by the pastor. The lessons were mostly stories from the Bible. This was likely influenced by her father. Gretchen performed excellently at school, always ranking among the top. On the morning of the 15th of August, 1975, this day was very special for the Harrington family because the mother had just given birth to a baby sister. Gretchen originally planned to stay home and wait for her mother and sister to return from the hospital, but her father encouraged her to still go to Sunday school. As we mentioned earlier, Gretchen's grades were always excellent, and missing class might affect her performance. After a moment's thought, Gretchen accepted her father's suggestion. Usually, she went to church with her two older sisters, but that day, her sisters decided to stay home and wait for their mother and sister, so she went alone with her Bible, walking to the church. Seeing this, many might think the father was somewhat irresponsible, right? How could he let such a young child go to school alone? Go to school alone? But from the perspective at that time, the security in Boomer had always been excellent. Gretchen was already 8 years old, and children, her age in the town, all went out alone to school or to play with no problems at all. Moreover, the church was very close to her home, just a 10-minute walk away. At that time, no one thought it was a problem for her to go to school alone. What could be wrong with that? The school's curriculum was divided into two parts. The children first studied at the first church. At noon, they would go together to the next church to complete the remaining courses. The remaining courses were held at the second church, which was where Gretchen's father worked. Around 11:30 am, the children arrived at the second church. At that time, Gretchen's father had already gone to work, but he realized his daughter was not among them. He thought she was still at the first church, so he called to check. The pastor at the first church was named David, who also had two daughters, and was a good friend of Gretchen's accent. Their families were very close. Gretchen's father asked him if his daughter was still there. David said that Gretchen hadn't been to the church at all that day. This made Gretchen's father feel that something was seriously wrong. So he asked David to help report it to the police and immediately drove out to search for his daughter. He searched all over the town, but couldn't find any trace of Gretchen. Then he also contacted his daughter's friends, but the friends were either at church or at home, and all said they hadn't seen Gretchen. The news of Gretchen's disappearance quickly spread throughout the town. The police launched an immediate search, and hundreds of townspeople spontaneously formed search teams to assist the police. They first searched the entire town, then gradually expanded the search to the surrounding areas. The police also deployed a helicopter to assist with the search. However, the entire search continued until late at night, but yielded no result. The next day, more volunteers joined the search teams, and the police created flyers, which were posted all over the town and surrounding areas and handed out to passing drivers. Despite everyone's best efforts, they still couldn't find a trace of Gretchen. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Then, all kinds of rumors and speculation started to surface. Some thought she had run away from home. Others said she drowned while swimming in the river, but most believed she had been kidnapped. Whatever the case, Gretchen's disappearance was a heavy blow to the local community. As we said before, the children in the town were very free, going out as they pleased, without adult supervision. But ever since Gretchen disappeared, the adults no longer allowed children to go out alone or wander the streets. They kept the children locked at home whenever possible. Even if they had to go out, someone had to accompany them. Some even cut the girls' long hair, making them look more like boys. You could say the peaceful atmosphere of the town vanished along with Gretchen's disappearance. Since no trace of Gretchen was found, the police began reconstructing her timeline of movements. They focused their investigation on the route from her home to the church. They did manage to get a few important leads. A witness said they saw a little girl resembling Gretchen near the church that morning, standing by a green station wagon, talking to the driver. But he was just passing by, so he didn't see what happened next, nor did he know if the girl got into the car. Another witness described a similar scene, but said it was a white Cadillac sedan. Based on these clues, the police investigated all vehicles in town, matching the descriptions, but couldn't confirm whether the owners were connected to the disappearance. A few days later, someone reported that a pair of shorts resembling Gretchen's had been found in a nearby town. However, after Gretchen's mother examined them, it turned out they were not Gretchen's shorts. Beyond that, there were no other leads. Weeks later, with nothing found, the police reluctantly called off the search. On the 14th of October, 2 months later, a man was jogging in a forest park. This park is located in Labumo town, about a 20-minute drive away. Along the way, he noticed something strange in the bushes by the roadside. Curious, he got closer and instantly felt a chill down his spine. It turned out to be human remains. The man immediately reported this to the park administrator, who then called the police. When the police arrived at the scene, they judged from the size of the remains that it was a child, but the body was badly decomposed and the face was unrecognizable. The child's clothes were neatly folded and placed aside. The police immediately thought of Gretchen, who had disappeared 2 months earlier. They took photos of the clothes and sent them to Gretchen's parents for identification. The mother instantly recognized the missing Gretchen. So they took photos of the clothes and sent them to Gretchen's parents for identification. The mother recognized immediately that those clothes were made by her own hands for her daughter, Gretchen. Later, through dental records, the police confirmed the victim, verifying it was Gretchen herself. The cause of death was quickly determined. She died from multiple severe blows to the head. That was it. The missing person case was officially upgraded to a murder case. But due to severe decomposition of the body, the police couldn't determine if Gretchen had been sexually assaulted. Also, DNA technology was not available at the time, so despite finding the body, there were still no valuable leads. After news of Gretchen's murder spread back to the town, the public panic grew even worse. Everyone lived in constant fear every day, not knowing when the killer might strike again. At that time, everyone was eager and anxious, wanting to catch the killer as soon as possible. So, whenever someone appeared suspicious, people would call the police immediately. This caused the police station's phone lines to be overwhelmed. This also put great pressure on the police investigation, adding many extra burdens. At the same time, the police investigated all individuals with a criminal record in the area, but still found nothing. As time passed, the investigation gradually stalled. As for regular viewers of our channel, you probably know we have covered many cases before, all starting with no leads at all, but as DNA technology developed, those cases were solved. However, in this case, neither on Gretchen's body nor on her clothes did the killer leave any DNA evidence, so this lead also came to a dead end. And just like that, more than 40 years passed by with no hope of solving the case in sight. Just as Gretchen's case was almost forgotten, two people appeared, bringing the case back into the public eye. These two were both journalists, Joanna and Mike. For years, they had been following Gretchen's case closely, carefully collecting various pieces of evidence. Later, they decided to publish the evidence they had gathered over the years in a book. The reason they focused on this case was simple, because they both came from the same town, Dumo, and at the time of Gretchen's murder, they were about the same age as Gretchen. Joanna was only 9 years old then, and she clearly remembered that after Gretchen was murdered, She clearly remembers that ever since Gretchen was murdered, her life changed drastically. Her parents never allowed her to go out alone again, and she lived every day cautiously. That fear stayed with her throughout her childhood. Therefore, they paid special attention to Gretchen's murder case. To write the book during this period, they also interviewed several investigating officers and eyewitnesses. It can be said that besides Gretchen's family, they cared the most about this case. Finally, the book was officially published in 2022. By then, the case had been unsolved for a full 47 years. The book details the entire process of Gretchen's murder, as well as some unknown clues. With the release of the book, it reignited public attention and discussion about the case. However, no one expected that. It was because of this book's appearance that this case, sealed for over 40 years, would see a major breakthrough. Just a few months after the book's publication, a woman contacted the police saying she recently read the book about the Gretchen case, which reminded her of an experience from her childhood. Maybe it was related to the case, so she wanted to find the officer responsible for the investigation to talk in detail. Of course, the police did not release the woman's name, so we will call her Miss A. The police invited Miss A to the station, and she began to tell her story. It turned out that at the time of the incident, Miss A was only 10 years old, and she lived near Gretchen's house as their neighbor. Being close in age, she knew Gretchen and her two sisters, and they were very good friends. Along with several other nearby girls, they often played together. Just a few days before Gretchen was murdered, Miss A was playing at another girl's house and stayed overnight there. That night, around midnight, she suddenly felt someone touching her body, so she woke up. Opening her eyes, the person touching her was her friend's father. When the father realized she was awake, he immediately turned and left the room. Because she was so young at the time, and she wasn't quite sure what had happened, Miss A did not tell anyone. Later, she stayed another night at this friend's house, and the same thing happened again. That night, her friend's father snuck into the bedroom again and did something indescribable to her. At dawn, she finally couldn't hold it in any longer. She told this matter to her two friends. But what she never expected was her two friends actually said, this kind of thing often happens to their sisters as well. After Miss A got home, she told her parents about it, but her parents chose not to report it to the police, only forbidding her from going to those friends' homes again. Speaking of which, some viewers might be wondering, what does this have to do with Gretchen's case? Although that father was indeed a bit perverted, you can't just assume he's related to the case because of that. But I think some sharp viewers may have already noticed something. We mentioned before, the priest at the first church, David, also has two daughters. That's right. The good friends of those two ladies are actually David's daughters. They were also very close to Gretchen. And that perverted father was the priest David who was supposed to teach Gretchen that day. David. Moreover, 1 month after Gretchen disappeared, at a time when Gretchen's body had not yet been found, that woman and another friend talked about David, and that friend said David had twice tried to lure him into his car on the road, but he refused both times. After obtaining these key clues, the police immediately launched a focused investigation on David. As a result, after reviewing previous files, many suspicious points were indeed discovered. I wonder if everyone still remembers, someone once saw on the day of the incident a green station wagon, and the driver was talking to a girl who looked very much like Gretchen. Later, they found out that David happened to have a green station wagon at that time. Also, according to records, on the day of the incident, because David was late hosting school, the class started 50 minutes later than usual, meaning David had ample time to commit the crime. But these were not the police's most crucial evidence. Later, the police carefully studied David's statement and found serious contradictions in his testimony, and this flaw had been overlooked by the police all along. It turns out, when the police first recorded David's statement, it had described what Gretchen was wearing that day, even saying that Gretchen had 2 braids at the time, and these descriptions were later confirmed to be accurate. But according to his own account, Gretchen had not gone to Sunday school that day at all, and he had never seen her. So how did he know what Gretchen was wearing? The police also found out that just a few months after Gretchen disappeared, David moved with his 3 children to another state. David was a major suspect in the case, so the police decided to question him immediately. At that time, David was already 83 years old, living in Georgia. On the 17th of July, 2023, the police summoned David to the station. When David realized the police suspected him of murdering Gretchen, he initially denied it fiercely. So the police decided to get straight to the point, directly confronting his darkest, most shameful secret. They said, a woman once spent the night at his house as a child, and he sneaked into her bedroom at night and molested her. Not only that, he did the same despicable things to his own daughter. Ce vil behavior completely destroyed his public image, and David's psychological defenses crumbled, leading him to confess he killed Gretchen. According to his own confession, that morning 48 years ago, David was driving his green station wagon on the way to church when he encountered Gretchen walking alone along the road. After looking around to make sure no one else was nearby, he pulled up next to Gretchen and asked if she wanted a ride. Because David was not only the pastor who preached to him, but also the father of his good friend, Gretchen had no suspicion and quickly got into David's car. But David did not take him to church. Instead, he drove into a remote wooded area. After parking the car, he demanded Gretchen take off his clothes, but Gretchen refused and insisted on going home. Furious, David struck Gretchen's head multiple times, causing him to lose consciousness. Then he took off Gretchen's clothes, but according to him, he only acted in self-defense against Gretchen's body. After that, he discovered that Gretchen had no pulse and was not breathing, so he drove to a nearby forest park, randomly found a bush, and covered Gretchen's body with leaves. Afterwards, David drove back to church and started his class, which explained why he was 50 minutes late. The police arrested David on suspicion of murder and extradited him back to Pennsylvania for investigation. But for the police, arresting David was just the beginning. Because David had served as a pastor in various places for decades, and his main job was to preach to the children. Therefore, the police believed there may be more victims, so they investigated child disappearances in the places where David had lived over the past decade, or murder cases. Soon, new discoveries were made. In 1991, a 4-year-old girl named Amanda Campbell from California went missing in a case very similar to Gretchen's. One day, after Amanda left her home, she suddenly disappeared without a trace. At that time, David was serving as a pastor in the same community. Although there is no direct evidence yet that David was involved in this case, due to the high similarity between this case and Gretchen's case, the police believe it is very likely the same person is responsible. Gretchen's case went to trial this year, and a verdict was recently reached. But to everyone's surprise, David recanted in court, saying his previous confession was made under police inducement and coercion. In the end, due to insufficient evidence, he was acquitted and released. Indeed, as a case from 50 years ago, currently, besides David's own confession, there is no other evidence that can directly convict him. It's likely his lawyer has noticed this as well. And also, I see the comments on foreign websites have already exploded. I wonder, what do viewers at home think? We will continue to follow up on this case, as the police have already taken David's DNA. So if he really is the killer,